He was the kind of kid who followed every rule. Never late, never loud, never wrong. Teachers loved him, parents bragged about him. And yet, years later, sitting in an office he didn't care about, he couldn't shake one thought. When did I stop thinking for myself? Because here's the thing, school didn't just teach him how to learn. It taught him how to wait. Wait to be told what matters. Wait for permission. Wait for life to start. What if the bell never stopped ringing? You just stopped hearing it? He sits in the back of the classroom staring at the clock. The second hand ticks louder than the teacher's voice. He's not bored because the subject is dull. He's bored because the entire room feels like a loop he can't escape. Same desks, same tone, same rules. Every day feels like déjà vu. Here's the thing, nobody tells you that school isn't just teaching you subjects. It's teaching you habits. Not conscious ones, but invisible ones. The kind that quietly shape how you move through life long after you leave the building. Think about it. You spend 12 years being told when to sit, when to speak, when to eat, when to go home. You learn that asking permission is normal even for using the restroom. You learn that your ideas are valuable only if they fit the format. You're rewarded for remembering, not for understanding. Punished for questioning. Praised for compliance. And after a while, that becomes your default mode. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's what the school system does. It quietly trains your unconscious. Not because teachers are evil or because education is bad, but because the structure itself was never built for thinking, it was built for managing. Look at where the modern school system came from the industrial age. The goal wasn't creativity, it was uniformity. Factories needed disciplined workers, not philosophers. So the system was designed to create people who could follow schedules, take orders, and avoid mistakes. That's why the bell rings. It's not just signaling time, it's conditioning your brain to obey external triggers. Pavlov would have been proud. Sir Ken Robinson, who spent his life studying education, once said, "We are educating people out of their creative capacities." He was right. Kids start school bursting with curiosity. They'll ask 100 questions about everything, but by the time they graduate, most have learned that curiosity is dangerous. It slows you down. It gets you labeled as difficult. What this really means is that school doesn't teach you how to think, it teaches you what to think. You're given answers before you even learn how to form questions. And the mind, once trained to avoid questioning, grows comfortable in obedience. That's how average is built, not through lack of intelligence, but through repetition of safe behavior. Let's break it down deeper. The real subject being taught isn't math or literature, it's validation. You learn early that your worth comes from the grade, not the growth. A number replaces the feeling of discovery. You start chasing approval instead of curiosity. The A becomes a form of emotional currency. And later in life, that same pattern follows you chasing promotions, likes, titles, external proof that you're enough. The school just gave it a name first. Report card. And here's the trap. Once you've internalized that your value is determined by others, you'll unconsciously avoid anything that risks disapproval. That's why most people stay in jobs they hate, relationships that suffocate them, or routines that slowly drain them. The pattern was installed long before adulthood. You were taught not to disappoint authority, not to fail, not to stand out too much. Naval Ravikant once said that society teaches you to be replaceable. That's what the system rewards: predictability. It wants you to be competent enough to function, but not curious enough to challenge it. And when you start to realize this, it can feel disorienting. Like the curtain is pulled back and you finally see the machinery behind the show. But here's what they don't tell you. The system isn't designed to stop you from thinking. It's designed to make you forget that thinking is an option. Once you remember that, the illusion starts to break. Most adults never question the structure that shaped them. They carry the same subconscious obedience into their careers. They wait for permission to take risks. They crave instructions before innovation. And they call it being responsible. But deep down, it's the same training just dressed in adult clothing. When Elon Musk couldn't find a school that encouraged curiosity in his kids, he built one himself. No grades, no hierarchy, no memorization, just problems to solve. It wasn't rebellion. It was recalibration. Because when you remove the pressure to perform, creativity naturally returns. So the hidden lesson isn't algebra or grammar, it's compliance. You learn that comfort comes from fitting in, not standing out. That silence equals safety. That waiting is wiser than acting. But here is the paradox. The very traits that make you a good student often make you a forgettable adult. And if that feels harsh, good. It means a part of you still remembers what real learning feels like. Messy, exciting, unpredictable. The kind of learning that school never made room for. Because at some point the bell stopped ringing, but you kept waiting for permission to leave the classroom. Here is what most people never notice. The school system doesn't just shape your schedule, it shapes your nervous system. It wires your dopamine response to external approval. Remember that feeling of getting an A on a test? That quick surge of pride? That instant relief? You weren't proud because you learned something new, you were proud because someone else approved of what you learned. That is the seed of average, the idea that your worth must always be confirmed by someone above you. From that point forward, every child becomes an approval addict. You stop exploring things for yourself and start asking, will this be on the test? As if curiosity needs permission to exist. The hidden trick is that schools reward precision, not perception. You get points for repeating an answer, not for questioning its premise. The system wants efficiency, not originality. It wants you to think fast, not deep. And over time, that rewiring shows up everywhere. Adults leave school but never stop looking for teachers. Bosses become the new graders. HR becomes the new principal. Performance reviews become report cards with better stationery. The thing is, you can't build extraordinary out of obedience. The same conditioning that trains you to avoid mistakes also kills the ability to take intelligent risks. That's why so many smart people end up stuck, not because they lack ambition, but because they were never taught to fail safely. Naval Ravikant put it simply, play long-term games with long-term people. But school trains you for short-term games test to test, semester to semester. It rewards sprinting, not strategy. You learn how to cram, not how to compound. You develop quick reflexes, not lasting wisdom. And then you graduate into a world that punishes exactly what school rewarded: hesitation. The workplace doesn't hand you a syllabus. Life doesn't announce exams in advance, and success doesn't come from remembering facts. It comes from navigating uncertainty. But your nervous system, conditioned by a decade of external control, still waits for directions. Let's break that down further. You weren't just taught to obey, you were taught to equate comfort with safety. The brain learned early that avoiding discomfort leads to approval. You sat still, followed rules, waited your turn, and got rewarded. But the truth is, all growth starts with discomfort. The muscle grows under stress. The mind expands through tension. And by shielding kids from both, the system quietly kills their appetite for challenge. Sir Ken Robinson once said, creativity is the process of having original ideas that have value. But originality requires the courage to be wrong. And school doesn't train that courage, it trains correctness. It punishes deviation. Which is why, by adulthood, so many people fear taking a path that doesn't already have a label. The straight A student becomes the employee who can't innovate without a checklist. The class clown becomes the entrepreneur, unpolished, unpredictable, but free. Society calls one successful and the other reckless. But over time, the reckless one learns faster. Elon Musk famously said that traditional education is good at teaching people to answer questions, not to ask them. That's why he built his own alternative for his kids, a system where curiosity drives the day, not curriculum. Because once you remove the fear of being wrong, kids naturally start solving problems adults can't. The school system doesn't need villains. Its design is enough. Bells, rows, ranks, marks, all symbols of control. The problem isn't teachers or textbooks. It's that the framework treats the human mind like a filing cabinet. Fill, close, repeat. What this really means is that most people are trained to perform, not to perceive. Performance is external, perception is internal. And when you live only for performance, your mind starts outsourcing meaning to metrics. You don't feel progress unless someone measures it for you. That's why even successful adults feel empty. They've spent their lives chasing gold stars in new forms, salaries, followers, recognition, forgetting that none of it feels like learning did when they were young. Because learning once had wonder in it. The real damage isn't intellectual, it's emotional. You lose the childlike curiosity that made you want to explore in the first place. You become efficient, predictable, measured, but hollow. You live for weekends and vacations because those are the only times you get to be human again. And yet, deep down, a part of you still remembers. That spark that used to make you ask why before you asked how. That's the part the system couldn't fully erase. It's waiting buried under layers of politeness and practicality. So, here it is the thing: the reward system you grew up in wasn't designed to make you wise. It was designed to make you useful. The question is, useful to whom? Because if you're not consciously designing your own curriculum, someone else already has, and you're still sitting in their classroom. So tell me, what grade would you give yourself if curiosity, not compliance, were the test? Let's be honest, school doesn't teach you how to live. It teaches you how to fit. You're not learning how to build a life. You're learning how to function inside one that's already built for you. Here's how that works. Every subject you study has a hidden subject underneath it, the lesson beneath the lesson. Math teaches consistency, but hidden underneath is obedience to procedure. Literature teaches empathy, but underneath it's deference to authority, interpreting the right meaning instead of your own. Science teaches curiosity, but in practice you're rewarded for memorizing the method, not questioning the result. This is what I call the curriculum of obedience. It trains you to respect hierarchy, to wait for approval, and to trust that meaning always comes from the top down. By the time you leave school, you've mastered the skill of waiting for someone else to define success. Let's break it down. You weren't told to question the textbook, you were told to use it. You weren't encouraged to ask why the system exists. You were trained to perform within it. The structure doesn't build thinkers, it builds participants. That's why so many people move from classroom to cubicle without noticing the difference. The lighting changes, the desks get nicer, but the hierarchy stays the same. Michel Foucault once described schools, prisons, and factories as disciplinary institutions. Different names, same mechanism: control through routine. In all of them, time is divided, space is controlled, movement is regulated, and behavior is measured. The goal isn't knowledge, it's predictability. Because a predictable person is easy to manage. And this is where it gets psychological. After years of this structure, your brain starts equating predictability with safety. You begin to crave structure even when it suffocates you. You start to feel anxious without instructions. You look for authority figures to approve your every step: teachers, bosses, partners, society. And if none exist, you build one in your head, a voice that tells you what's acceptable, what's too much, what's not practical. That's how the system survives even when you think you've outgrown it. Here's the thing. The human brain loves clarity. It hates chaos. The school system exploits that by giving you the illusion of clarity. Grades, rubrics, ranks. But the real world isn't graded. It's judged. You don't get feedback from life every Friday. You get silence. And if you're trained to rely on constant evaluation, silence feels like failure. That is why so many talented people never start the projects that could change their lives, because there is no guaranteed A+ waiting at the end. No rubric score, no one to clap for them. So they wait, and call it planning. But what they're really doing is asking for permission again, permission that no longer exists. Jordan Peterson often says that responsibility brings meaning, and he's right. But most people don't realize how deeply they've been trained to avoid responsibility. Because real responsibility means owning the consequences of your own decisions, something school never prepares you for. You're taught to chase perfect answers, not to wrestle with complex ones. You learn to fear being wrong, not to learn from it. So when adulthood demands decisions with no right answer, most people freeze. Here's a subtle example. Remember how school taught you to raise your hand before speaking? That tiny action seems harmless, but it encodes a pattern. Wait until you're chosen to speak. And that conditioning doesn't end at graduation. It's why meetings are full of people who have ideas but never voice them. It's why so many adults think, someone should fix this, but never think, maybe I should. The hand is still raised, just invisibly now. Erich Fromm once wrote that modern humans have escaped external authority only to replace it with internalized obedience. We think we're free because no one's watching, but the truth is, the watchtower is inside our own minds. And the irony? We built it ourselves, brick by brick, grade by grade. But here is the hope. Once you recognize that the voice in your head is not you, but a training echo, you can start retraining it. The moment you stop asking what's allowed and start asking what's possible, you begin rewriting your mental curriculum. That's when life stops feeling like a report card and starts feeling like a story. Because the truth is, the system was never strong enough to control you. It just made you forget you had a choice. Here is the paradox. Everything school taught you to do well is the exact thing holding you back now. Follow rules. Avoid failure. Seek approval. Stay predictable. Those habits make you easy to manage, but impossible to evolve. The real education, the kind that wakes you up, begins the moment you start unlearning what school conditioned into you. Let's start with this. Curiosity isn't childish. It's survival. Every major shift in human progress, from the internet to space travel, started with a question no teacher could answer. The curious are the ones who keep civilization alive. But we've built a culture that mistakes curiosity for rebellion. Here's the thing: when you were a kid, you didn't care about being right. You cared about discovering what was true. You'd touch, break, mix, question everything. Then school stepped in and made you afraid of mistakes. You stopped exploring because the cost of being wrong became social embarrassment. That's how genius gets buried, not by failure, but by fear. When Sir Ken Robinson said the education system kills creativity, he didn't mean it as a metaphor. He meant it literally. Creativity dies when there's only one acceptable answer, and the tragedy is that we normalize it. We call it discipline. We call it being practical. We praise conformity like it's wisdom. But look at the people who changed the world. They were all, in one way or another, terrible students. Jobs dropped out. Musk skipped the line. Einstein was labeled slow. Naval never cared about credentials. They understood something the rest of us forgot. Learning isn't something you do for approval, it's something you do for freedom. Because real intelligence isn't memorization, it's adaptation. It's being able to connect unrelated ideas and see patterns no one else sees. And that kind of thinking doesn't come from textbooks, it comes from being alive, observing and experimenting without fear of being wrong. Let's break that down. The school system prepares you for stability. But stability doesn't exist anymore. The world shifts too fast. What's valuable today might be irrelevant tomorrow. The people who thrive aren't the ones who got straight A's. They're the ones who learned how to learn again. Here's what this really means. You have to unlearn the idea that life is graded. There's no final exam, no teacher waiting to give you permission to start. You are both the student and the curriculum now. Your questions are your syllabus, your failures are your homework, and your curiosity, that's the only real test. Elon Musk once said, "You can learn anything you want for free. It's all there online." And he's right, access isn't the problem anymore. Conditioning is. People don't fail because they lack knowledge. They fail because they still wait for someone to tell them what to do with it. You've been trained to fear being average. But here's the twist. Average isn't a skill level, it's a mindset. It's the belief that comfort equals safety. The truth? Comfort is a cage. It makes the days blur together until you mistake survival for living. And the saddest part? Most people won't even realize it until it's too late. They'll look back and wonder when their curiosity died, when their opinions became recycled, when their dreams started sounding like job descriptions. But if you're still here listening, it means something in you hasn't gone quiet yet. That small, restless spark that still questions things others accept. That's your real education. It's not gone. It's just been waiting for you to remember. Here's the blueprint to start unlearning. Stop chasing certainty. Start chasing clarity. Stop collecting facts. Start connecting dots. Stop asking what's allowed. Start asking what's true. Because once you start thinking for yourself again, every part of your old conditioning begins to crack. You stop measuring your worth by comparison. You stop chasing the grade. You start creating your own definition of success, one that isn't about fitting in, but about becoming real. And here's the thing. You don't need to hate the system to outgrow it. You just need to stop mistaking it for truth. School taught you the alphabet, but not the language of your own mind. It taught you how to write essays, but not how to write your life. That's what this channel and this moment is really about. Remembering what they made you forget, that learning is supposed to feel alive. So maybe this video isn't about school at all. Maybe it's about you and the silent agreement you made to stay small. And maybe more importantly, are you ready to unlearn it? Drop it in the comments just right, I'm unlearning. Let's see how many of us are done being trained to stay average. Years ago, he waited for the bell to tell him when to move. Now the world waits for him to decide what's next. He finally realized the classroom was never the cage. His conditioning was. And once you see that, you stop needing permission. You stop chasing grades and adult form titles, likes, applause. You start chasing truth. Because the system's greatest trick was convincing you that being average was safe. It isn't. It's just familiar. So if you felt something shift tonight, don't just watch. Wake up with us. Subscribe and start unlearning everything they taught you to obey.